Ready to talk about innovation that's changing the world and meet the people that are making it happen? Welcome to the Global Code podcast.
Here, we go beyond the buzzwords, beyond the headlines to uncover the real stories behind technology's global impact.
From AI to clean tech, blockchain to biotech, we are exploring innovations that matter and talking to pioneers driving change in every corner of the world with a focus on people, purpose, and possibility.
Wondering how AI and emerging technologies will shape your future?
Yeah, we're wondering that too.
So we are asking the boldest thinkers and builders we can find.
Come with us on this journey into the heart of innovation across borders and boundaries.
This is Global Code.
Tech for everyone, everywhere.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Global Code. I'm your co-host, Dr. Salima Bhimani.
Dr. Shadan Deleveaux.
And Ashish Pujari.
We are really excited today because we have with us Kirin Kalia. Hello.
Hello, hello. So awesome to see you and meet your fabulous co-hosts.
Well, I met Kirin actually at an event and we immediately became friends. And as soon as I started to talk to her, I said, she has to be absolutely on this podcast because she's got this incredible background that I want to share with all of you. So Kirin is the founder and CEO of Grow Through Story, which is a startup veteran and communications company. And she's an expert in the space with 25 years experience in journalism and marketing. She helps founders deliver the right message with clarity and confidence so they raise money and grow their revenue faster, which, oh my gosh, I'm sure people absolutely love you. They might be naming their children after you, I'm sure. Kirin has coached over 1,000 founders to pitch to investors and innovation leaders at companies like Visa, P&G Ventures, Estee Lauder, and others. She's also a Techstars 2023 All-Star Mentor and recently taught the Pitch Deck Masterclass for Harvard alumni entrepreneurs. So we are super, super excited to, and one of the reasons why I felt like there would be so much that our audience would get out of speaking with you is because you have such an incredible global perspective and global experience working with founders that are tech-centered. And so I really wanted to start with your story. Like, how did you get to this point in your career where you're empowering other leaders to really succeed and entrepreneurs to, make their mark in the world?
It's a very good question. Thank you, Salima. Being a storyteller, I have a very condensed version of the story. There's a longer version, but it starts with being a journalist and just being a very curious person from a young age. And I really enjoy telling other people's stories. And when you can find a great story and share that with an audience and see how it changes their perspective or their world, it's really empowering. And I'll be honest with you, that's what drives journalists in addition to wanting to bring certain truths to light and to make sure that things are fair and honest in the world. For me, it was always that more human element that drove me to it. And so when I was lucky enough to start working in tech and business journalism during the dot-com days in New York City, which is a long time ago.
That's a long time ago.
A long time ago. I was talking to these amazing people, and I thought business journalism was boring, but these were amazing people, but they still had a really hard time sometimes explaining what they did. So that was part of the conversation. And I'd say, okay, so is this what you're building? They're like, yeah, that's it. I'm like, great. I'm going to put that in the article. And that's probably how you should describe yourself to other people. So that was one of the kernels where it started. And then from there, doing lots of different things over the years, I worked at a expat media company in Europe. I worked as an editor at a think tank in Washington in immigration policy, where that was a totally different challenge, trying to make sure that these people who were super, super smart and thoughtful actually got their ideas across without all this extra verbiage that they love to throw in there. And then I don't wish anybody the joy of editing a policy paper. On my share, I'm very happy that is in the past. I learned a lot. And being able to communicate with a larger audience was always important to me. And so I'll be honest, I had this moment when I was working sort of my second round of tech and business journalism in 2011, 2012, 2013. We had this conference called Launch, worked with somebody who's fairly well known in this industry. And we just put these people through an incredible process to get ready to go and launch on stage, right, in front of mostly investors in San Francisco. And when we had the winner announced, the electricity in the room, the vibe was amazing. I was like, I love this. I want more of this in my life. I just didn't really realize it yet. Fast forward, I spent a couple of years at a B2B SaaS business where we were helping corporate innovation teams with software, but doing a lot of hands-on work to help them run those programs. And then, of course, prepare founders to pitch in front of those corporate executives. I got pulled into that because of my background. And I was like, this is the best part of my job. And eventually I was like, okay, this is all I want to do. Had to look inside first, get the courage and say, okay, this is what I'm going to go build a business around, is just helping founders show up for these really important moments so that they actually get what they want, which is usually money in the form of investment or customers, and just bring everything I have ever learned across all those different experiences, living in different places, moving around within the US, having immigrant parents, having lived in the Netherlands, which is my mother's home country, having spent time in India with my Indian family. Like, I bring all of that to every conversation to help somebody. And when they show up with that clear, concise message and confident, I'm like, yes, because now you're more likely to get what you want. So that's sort of a short version, I guess. That helps.
So you basically superpower people's success is what I would like to say.
I'd like to think so. And I'll be honest with you, what I've learned in this process is that I didn't want to be the startup founder. I like to help them
Mm.
make that impact in the world. And you know this because you're a moonshot person. There's so many people with these really big ideas and they want to make them happen. And they don't always know how to explain that to other people. So I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, that's my superpower. How do I help you make sure that somebody on the other end understands what you're doing and then gets excited about it? Because that's when the magic can start to happen. Because if I
Yeah.
don't understand it, I can't get excited. And you guys probably know this, but confused people don't invest and they don't buy. So we don't want that for anybody who's brilliant and wants to change the world in a good way.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's
I love this element of just the focus on helping people tell their stories. And I feel like that when we think of tech, sometimes that element, that human element, that compelling element of the truth of the story and the power of the story gets lost
yeah.
in the technology.
Oh my goodness,
And
all the time.
I'm sure that you see this, right? You can have a phenomenal product or company, but if it doesn't resonate with people on a very real level, it,
Seriously.
yeah. So I don't
Seriously.
know. Can you talk a little bit just about that, about helping
Yeah.
companies to just extract, or first identify, but then second, extract those key things that make
Yeah.
their story compelling?
Well, first of all, you have to know who you're talking to and what they care about. That's what we always start with. So if you're talking to an investor, that's different than talking to your customer. That's different than talking to the person who you want to join your company, on as an advisor, as your, CTO, whatever it is. So everybody needs something to hear something different. You have some larger mission, but you're going to focus in on what they care about. So that's the first thing. And then it's, how do you make sure that you are bringing it down to a level that they understand? So when you're super technical, and I've had this happen so many times, they just want to throw you in the deep end of the pool of the technical stuff. Like, I
Mm.
don't need that to start with. First of all, I don't understand it and I don't care. If I just want to invest, I'm like, so if your electric car battery, that's one of my favorite examples, like, nobody wants to be stuck at a party talking to somebody about electric car batteries. You would go find a drink, you would go find a bathroom, you would find somebody else to talk to, because you'd be like, this is not interesting to me. Like, why should I care? You're not answering that question for me. But if you come up with some really interesting insight, or you can find a way to relate it to my life, give me some kind of example, grounded in reality, as I call it, then it starts to get interesting. So
Mhm.
if for example, you're talking to an investor who has kids, and you have, like, I've been working with a founder in the pediatric space, like, then you're going to be able to relate to them in a different way, right? So you're going to use that information and relate to them. If you are building something in a, supply chain kind of thing, and you're talking to somebody who doesn't know supply chain, you can't assume that they know what you know. And so you're going to be like, okay, well, think about it like this. It's just like when you go to the store and you see something like this happen, like there's an empty shelf, like, oh, there's probably something behind, like, then they're going to understand it more. And the other part is, remember it so that they can tell it to someone else, which is the thing I drill on all the time with founders, because if people don't remember you, they're also not likely to be interested in helping you in some way too, right? Like, is that the person you just can't stop thinking about because there's something there, or they gave you that example and now you can't stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
So I think that answers your question, right? On sort of
No, it
like,
does. And it
are we talking
truly
about the purpose?
resonates. sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
Yeah.
it really resonates because what you're saying is true. It's especially true in the startup space and in the founder space, and when folks are trying to just identify sources of money and funding and things like that. But it's true way beyond that and much more
Yeah.
broadly, right? So it's true when you're trying to tell your story about your career and you're trying to land a job, or you're trying to build
Everything.
your network. That know who you're speaking to, know what they care about, and how do you deliver that information in a way that's digestible to them? I mean, those three
It's a
nuggets right
skill.
there, if folks walk away with nothing else,
It's a
I feel
skill.
like that's incredibly important.
Yeah,
So,
it's a
I
skill, and that's the beautiful thing is when it's a skill, you can learn it. It's not like, "Oh my goodness, like, that's not something I could ever do. Like, I'm just gonna go sit in my corner over here and build and be technical because that's all I know how." You could make that choice, but as a human being, you have the choice to say, "I'm going to learn and lean into something that I don't understand, that is not my strength, and be uncomfortable until I get better at it." And I'll tell you, I saw that with a founder who I met through an accelerator program, building in the quantum space. You wanna talk about an area where people have no clue what you're doing, like, it's very hard to relate that to the rest of the world, right? But even before I worked with him, he had made a point, although he was this brilliant PhD, of learning how to talk about his business in a way that other people could understand. And it showed up in the way that he put his deck together, in the way that he explained what he was building, and then it's like, okay, now at least you have a base level and we can get you even better from here, right? So that's the other thing is you can reach a certain level and you can say, okay, I'm done, I'm going to stop. But if you're somebody who's very competitive, which most startup people usually are, and they are always in search of the next level and hacks and getting, whatever the thing that nobody else has, great. Like now you're here, let's keep getting better. Just like martial arts, just like anything else, like there's always another level to go up. So now you can do it in a basic way. Can you now really excite someone and hold their attention? Like that's the next thing. Could you, for instance, be the person who's going to be on a TED start type of stage talking about quantum at some point? Is that one of your goals so that you can continue to share your idea with the world and make sure that it exists and gets funded and more people want to use it and all that good stuff?
Actually, one thing, something that you said, and then Shadan, you'd followed up, is the thing I started to wonder too is because tech, especially tech folks, people who are tech founders, they are really into their tech. Like they're really attached to.
Oh my
I mean,
goodness.
everybody is attached to their idea. That's true if you're a founder. That's usually true. That's usually the case. But I found with tech folks even more so, because and we think that the tech that we're building is so obvious to everybody else, or if it's not obvious to everybody else, but how could it not be when I explain it, right? So I think there's something about you unlocking folks, right? And recognizing, and something that you and I we talked about prior to like coming on here is like the human element, right? Like,
Yep.
I mean, the technological solution is important, but the
Yep.
human element cannot be forgotten. And so I love that you kind of bring people back to themselves in this process. And I think that's really important, quite frankly, to not just
Absolutely.
find customers, but also to make your solution more human.
Well, there's all of those things. And so, look, you guys talk about AI all the time. I around it all the time. And then I also have these very existential moments of like, well, if somebody can just put something into Chat GPT or they can something into some other, platform and they can spit out a deck or whatever, do they really need somebody to help them? And the reason you need somebody to help you is because that AI doesn't have energy, to be clear. We as humans are energetic beings. And so if you want to show up with your essence, you have to put it in there. And an AI is not going to give you that essence. And it's going to sound like a lot of other things. So it could be a great starting point. And believe me, like happy to use it for research and to maybe even help me edit or refine my ideas, but it's never going to speak for me because it's never going to connect with the other human being. Right. And people do business with people and people do business with people they like and they feel connected to. Right. So you can always justify something based on logic, but it's probably emotional first. Right? Like, I like you. Like, I want to talk to you. Like, but yes, you're also like, you check all these other boxes. And yes, we should invest for these reasons. But like, I like you. I think you're smart and you're going to figure this out.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point, Kiran, which is why should I care, right? Like, why should I care about
Absolutely.
your idea? And it reminds me of this offsite we were on a couple of months ago, and it's a company offsite, and one of the team building exercises was sell this mixer to this other person, right? Like you are this company which is selling mixers. And of course I was like, me being me, I was like, oh, it has more power and it can do this and
Yes.
it can do that. And nobody cared really.
Nope.
And then the other team, somebody brought up, it's like, oh, imagine you have this party and then your mixer breaks and then you suddenly can't, mix a smoothie, but this mixer will not break. So that kind of resonated with people because everybody kind of has the experience that
Recognizes.
something, yeah, something broke in the
Recognize.
party.
Right. And
So kind of sounds like what you do.
yeah, and then there's the other side of other sort of underneath that, and that's one of the things, like, honestly, like, in all of the things and, I've done and learned over the years, I think the one thing that I've realized is that I didn't understand human psychology early enough in my journey. If I had, I could have saved myself a lot of pain. Different story. Taking things personally that were not personal, for example. But if you know humans, most of the time we're thinking about ourselves because, there's this thing called self-preservation, right? We want to continue to survive. So we're always looking for things that are going to help us first. And then there's things that are very painful and we tend to like want to not be around that. Like we want to go away from pain and we want to go towards pleasure or some other dream or something that we have. And so anything that you are building and you want someone to care about, you're probably going to be thinking about those levers to pull as well as what's in it for them. And if you're not doing that, you're not going to connect with them and you're not going to get what you want. Like you might have the best technology in the world. And believe me, there's plenty of evidence of this. And I remember I was a political science major in college. So that's the other funny thing. Like nobody would have ever expected me to be doing this based on that. But I took a politics and technology and politics class in the mid 1990s to date myself. And one of the things that was true is the best technology doesn't always win. And we knew that was true in the 90s and we know that now, right? So just because you built the best LLM doesn't mean it's going to be the one that wins. Just because you built the best browser doesn't mean it was going to be the one that won in the mid 90s. Just because you built the best whatever, right? And so you need to be able to make sure it resonates with the right people so that it actually gets to be a thing in the world. Otherwise, it'll just sit there on a shelf. And folks, nothing ever sells itself.
Yeah,
Please.
but interesting that, we are talking about selling. So let me ask you this. You said you did this work kind of during the internet boom. So that was a long time ago. And then we now have the AI boom. So how has the narrative or people's needs and pain and pleasure levers have changed or really have not changed?
Fundamentally, humans are still human. The technology has changed. How we can meet our needs has changed. We get a lot more instant gratification than we used to. So again, for reference, there was this thing back in the late 90s in New York called Cosmo.com. And you would go on your dial-up and this was the famous order, was a pint of ice cream and a bag of potato chips. And somebody would come on a Cosmo, branded scooter with their backpack or whatever, and come to your door in New York City and bring you your ice cream and your chips. And that was really cool because it was that form of instant gratification. Now, of course, it was not a sustainable model. A lot of money had to go into it to keep it going. Didn't work, right? Smartphones changed that. Mobile, connections changed that. So things suddenly got a lot easier. So we could have instant gratification on a totally different scale. And now we take that for granted and that's normal. By the way, that's true of all technology. We get to a certain point where we're just like, what was life like before this? Like, what did we do before we could just press a button on an app and have food? Like, we actually used to make a phone call and go to the restaurant and pick it up ourselves. Like that's what used to happen, right? Some people still do that. But it was that moment of like knowing that you could get something and that changes the world, right? And so I think humans are always going to want things better, faster, whatever. They want to take away their pain and they want more pleasure. So that hasn't changed. AI will let you do things in a way that's much faster. It can also, if you're not being intentional about it, start to replace some of that human touch. And Salima, I know you and I have kind of talked about that before. Like, I don't want to lose the human in any kind of conversation or interaction. So for me, I have chosen AI as a research tool as something to help me refine my thoughts or maybe as a thought starter, but it is never going to replace me in the way that I communicate with the world. That is where I have drawn my line, for example. And in any sort of founder who even when they're building AI should not use just AI to show up for their business. They're still going to have conversations with people who work for them. They're still going to have to show up as a human for the board meeting. They're still going to need to show up as a human, to take the call with the investor, provided they actually got the meeting first, like they broke through the noise to get there. So that's some of those things haven't changed. That said, AI feels very different than anything I've seen in my 20 some years of doing this, right? There's a real fundamental shift. Like back in 99, it was this sort of euphoric, like everybody needed a website. Everybody was like building on GeoCities and like, again, totally hating myself. And you had all these celebrities coming in and being spokespeople like Bill Shatner for Priceline and Whoopi Goldberg for Flues, if anybody remembers what Flues is. Type of virtual currency. But like it was crazy. And then it went bust and then eventually came back. I think we've had a mini sort of blip here. I think things have evened out a bit, but it's not going anywhere. And we're going to adapt. And it's going to be, table stakes now for any new business. What kind of AI are you building into it? Even if it is something that is not a fundamentally AI company, it still needs to be built in. Like, look, I'll tell you, I worked with a legal tech company recently, and I was like, you're going to have to answer this question. Like, you're still solving an important fundamental problem, which is important, by the way. You have to solve a real problem. But anybody who's going to invest is going to want to know what you're using AI for with this.
On that point, Kirin, like as you are talking to founders globally, I mean, what is the tech startup landscape looking like these days? I mean, I was talking to somebody just a couple of weeks ago, and they were mentioning that, to your point, like they were talking to investors, and one of the points of conversation was not only are you just using AI, like how much AI are you using, and are you using AI enough so that we can justify the spend that we would have on you? So I think I'm really curious, like as you're, especially because you have the founder perspective, like as
Yeah.
you were talking to founders, what are they telling you about this global landscape?
I think those who are not building pure AI companies are feeling the pressure of it being harder to raise. I literally heard that just this morning. And so being able to show how they're using AI to have a business that is going to resonate better with consumers or be more efficient in some way is important. I think that the fact that there's so much money going into AI isn't going to change in the near term. I think that's still where things are going to be. That said, there's still money that goes other places. And so those founders who are not building pure AI should not despair, but it's going to require them to be much more creative probably in how they finance. They might need to, bootstrap in a different way. They may need to look at other types of funding sources to make sure that they can actually make their beautiful vision happen in the world, right? It might not happen the way they thought it would. But I do believe that there is money out there for those who are really great and solve a real problem and are committed to finding a way forward. So I think that's just in general, in terms of different sort of geographies, I think that in the US, the money is much more easy to get in many ways. Other ecosystems are a little bit more conservative. They require more proof and traction and whatever, and you probably need to be more connected and things like that. Like I've heard those kind of things about other ecosystems. If they're able to get money from friends and family and that sort of stuff, that still remains an advantage. I think in lots of places they might be able to get government funding depending on where they are. I think also it's important that we continue to have founders building everywhere. Like it is never been just a US thing, nor should it be. And people are going to build what they know people in their part of the world need. And they're going to build it in that way so that it is respectful of cultural things, that it's in the right language, that it accounts for things that an outsider wouldn't necessarily know. Like I saw this with it was a version of Expensify for Saudi Arabia. This was when I was doing the Visa FinTech program globally. And this particular founder is like, look, in Saudi Arabia, we have all these certain things that the government expects us to report back. Now, is the Saudi market big enough that Expensify was going to do that out of the gate? Probably not. Maybe at some point they get around to it. In the meantime, this guy can build it, right? And he knew exactly what he needed to do for his market. And I think you're seeing that all over now. Same with AI, right? Like, you should not use only an English language LLM from a big tech company in the US. Like, probably not going to be what you need it to be for your problem in your part of the world.
Yep. And then I guess, why are people asking for AI? Like, do they see it as table stakes because it adds efficiency, or is it because it will sell better, or is it a predictor of success?
I think there's a combination of things. I think consumer and business expectations are starting to change. So when I already get it in other things and you're not offering it to me, then I'd be like, why isn't this here? Right. So we saw this happen with mobile. Like, at a certain point, like, y'all have been around long enough to know this, and probably anybody listening, is that there was a crisis moment for Facebook right before they went public. And I was a reporter at that time, and it was like, was Facebook going to be able to make this transition to mobile, right? They had a very great experience on web. That was where most of their audience was, but things were starting to shift, and could they do that, right? And whereas somebody who's building mobile first would have a very different experience. And they did make that transition, and they were able to do just fine. But there was that moment around like 2011, 2012. And so I think for a lot of the companies that are building now, like, the cost of doing these things has dropped. The expectations are changing. It probably does make you more efficient. Like, you should just be, it is the right thing to do. It was like, in 2020, we all knew everybody needed to be on Zoom, and some of us have been on, and remote people for a long time. And so, like, if you didn't know how to do that, or you weren't doing your business in some way that made you accessible virtually, like, what are you doing, right? So I think it's a combination of things.
I think you mentioned just a few different things that are incredibly interesting. So one, there seems to be this tension or intersection between the ability of entrepreneurs to have more access to opportunity because of AI, but simultaneously the availability and the emergence of AI is maybe making some opportunities a bit more difficult to fund or to execute. Right. So there seems to be an intersection there, or a bit of a tension there. And then two, the other thing that I think that you mentioned, I think just incredibly important, is the importance of voices from outside of the US as well. And so just wondering if you could kind of talk about the intersection of those, right? The
Yeah.
availability of AI and how it creates opportunity, and the importance of that to places maybe outside
Yeah.
of the US, and the importance of their voices to the discussion.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there's this sort of funny thing that's happened in tech, which is that we're all about innovation and disruption, and yet a lot of the systems to create new companies haven't gotten better. It's this weird thing. And I think that talent is distributed equally, but opportunity is not, which continues to frustrate me to no end. And I really hope that there's ways to make sure that the best and smartest people have a chance, that the deck is not stacked against them in whatever way. So I still want there a way for somebody to be surfaced with something great, no matter where they are, to be part of that, because nobody has a monopoly on talent. Like, they really don't. Like, there's a whole other discussion we can get into around certain policies, because I did spend a fair amount of time in immigration policy, that you get the best people to come to you if they're not already here, and that you make sure they continue to come to you, and that they want to stay, and that they can do what they need to do to make you more prosperous. But the challenge is that if the old gatekeepers continue to be the gatekeepers, and believe me, this is another thing from political science that comes back to me all the time, which is that the people who have power don't want to give it up. They're never incentivized to give it up. Once they have it, they don't give it up. You've seen it all over the world in lots of different ways. Like, that's just what that is. That's kind of how humans are, right? Not a huge surprise. So I think there are lots of people out there who see the inequalities and been working to change it, and I don't want them to give up, because I think that the money still needs to go to places it's not going to. People still need to be getting it, and those voices need to still be amplified. It's easier than ever for them to do that because of technology, but they're still one of many in a sea of stuff. And, it can be really hard for some of that cream, if you want to call it that, to rise to the top and be surfaced. So, I coached through one of these visa programs last year. It's called She's Next. It's all about celebrating female founders in different parts of the world. They get to pitch. They, all get sort of this great exposure, and one of them wins usually some prize money, right? And they get to mingle with some business executives, leaders, sometimes government folks in their home market. And this young woman building a mental health startup in Kuwait for giving people more access to therapists, right? This is a place where mental health support has never been something that people talked about, but is absolutely important. And there aren't enough professionals to supply it. So does AI make sense as a solution for that? Yes, right? And she was fairly easily being able to talk to investors. I don't want there to be anything in her way of stopping her or anyone else from building in that space, right? Like, I think that's extremely important. And she's one of the people who should be building it because she came from a background where she saw the importance of mental health. Like when she had a death in the family and nobody was there to really talk about the grief. Right. And that sort of impetus to build and change the world, founders have that no matter where they are from. And I can say that having coached founders from these different visa programs in fintech and just female founders globally, like they all have it. Sometimes it means they don't fit in where they're from because they're just that kind of weird and different, but they need to be supported and celebrated, even if not in their home market, so they can continue to build.
Yeah, that's
kind of a roundabout way.
I mean, Kirin, that's a really good point. And I think that interesting, like when you take what you're saying, you juxtapose it against like the growing investment that a lot of countries like in Africa and Asia are making in the startup ecosystem. I mean, the numbers are not insignificant, right? We're talking like hundreds and millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Some of it is coming from their own country. Some of it is coming from outside, North America and other places. But there is definitely sort of, I think, a shift that's happening globally where maybe there's a recognition that like we can't just be receivers of tech that the US builds. We in fact have a place and a role to play in building tech, to your point, not just for our people, but for the world, right? Like who's to say that tech coming out of, any country in the world that's not the US, right, doesn't have something to offer us.
Absolutely.
So I think that there is that sort of shift. And I'm just curious, like how you take that in, like, and again, of course, where that money goes in these countries, a different story, whatever, that's a whole other thing. But the point is that we're seeing growing investment in the way that we've never seen before.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, like I did look at the numbers. It was about $100 billion.
Yeah.
2024 went into AI startups. It's already reached about $100 billion in the first half of 2025. Like those are like the two numbers you need to like. That's a lot of money. There's a lot of bets. Now, some of those bets are bigger, right? They're going into some of the bigger companies that you already know. Like there's a ton of money. And so there isn't necessarily all that much being sort of spread out across a bunch of other ones. But the laws of investing would tell you that you should make a lot of bets, right? Because we don't know where the next big thing is going to come from. And we can't assume that the big players today are going to be the big players tomorrow, or that these things have already been figured out. You guys all know this. You've worked at Google. Some of you are still there. Like everybody thought search was done. And then Google was like, oh, by the way, let's do this a different way. And like, do you use Alta Vista? Do you use Lycos? I used those things in like 1998 and nobody uses them anymore. There's no guarantee that like that market is done and sort of sewn up and over, right? You can still innovate, especially when there's somebody who comes at it with a fresh perspective. And so that is something I don't want anyone to ever take for granted, is like, don't just look at something and be like, that is done or that's saturated or whatever. If you have a new way to do it that's better and you're not sort of held back by the legacy stuff, you can do it a lot faster. And certain parts of the world can do it because they don't have legacy infrastructure holding them back either. And we've seen that too. Like the famous example is in Kenya with mobile money. Like they were one of the first ones to do it because they could, right? With phones. We've seen people who don't ever have a landline because they never needed it. You see people not using credit cards because they never needed it, because they just went to the next thing.
Yeah. I love this, like the leapfrogging that can happen.
Absolutely.
The thing I was thinking of is because you're having these conversations with founders, but you're also helping them be like investor facing, right? So I imagine you're also having conversations with a lot of these investment firms and investors. And, one of the things that I've been learning as I've been talking to folks and sort of on that side of the house is also sort of like, and this kind of goes back to something you were saying earlier about, Ashish's question about why potentially are, like where are investors' heads really?
Yeah.
And I think the challenge maybe that we're facing, I'd love your perspective on this, is that the technology, especially AI, is moving so quickly in terms of what it can do, what it can't do, where it becomes useful, where it doesn't become useful. And we see from the numbers that adoption of AI, like it is pretty low in terms of success rates for ROI, right? So
I know.
there's
Yeah.
that piece of the puzzle. But I think the other piece of the puzzle is that you have a lot of people in the investment space who actually don't understand AI themselves, making decisions about companies who are using AI or aren't using AI, right? So we're kind of in a double bind, right? Like around sort of the literacy part of it, the education part of it,
Yeah.
really understanding,
Yeah.
keeping up with the technology, and then being able to make decisions. And I think this is where the responsible AI piece comes in as well.
Yeah.
Is, I mean, they are making decisions about whether AI can do X, Y, or Z for a company. But then there's also the ethical piece about it, which is something that we all care about on this call, is
Yeah.
the extent to which what they're using is in fact going to be ethical and, hopefully done in a way that doesn't cause harm.
Yes. Yes. And that's the thing that I've sort of landed on, is that the human still need to make the decision. They
Yes.
still need to, there's a judgment call. And so you can look at something and say, okay, that's what you're telling me to do. I still decide whether I do it or not.
Mhm.
Right? Like this idea that you can automate things just out of your life. Maybe. I don't think we're there yet. I like having agency. Humans are designed for agency. We are the only creatures on this earth who can think about things and decide what we want to do. We are not just driven by that instinct to survive. That is part of it, but like we are not that, like gazelle on the savannah or whatever, like just trying to outrun the cheetah so that we don't get eaten, right? Like
Yeah.
we get to think about things and we get to be thoughtful and make choices. And the part of this that I think that doesn't get talked about enough, and I've been thinking about this just as we were getting ready to have this conversation, was that the kind of people who are building AI matter also.
Mhm.
So I come from a world where, look, I spent a lot of time at events and putting events together and going to other people's events. And the person who is in charge of the event sets the tone for everything, right? Like what kind of vibe is going to be there? What kind of music are they playing? What kind of food are they serving? What kind of space are we in? And an AI founder who is a good human, who's well-intentioned, is going to do something different than somebody who's just purely driven by money or who's just purely driven by the need to outdo somebody else or whatever. So I would encourage anybody who has the ability to invest to be looking at the quality of the human being as a human, not just as somebody who is smart or has certain experience or has that track record or blah, blah, blah. Like I want good people to be building this stuff for the world that we're going to live in. I want that to be an amazing party. Like, I know which parties I like to go to because of the people who organize them, right? Because that's like the greatest vibe. Like, I have friends whose things I would always go to. There's people whose vibe I don't want to be around. I want the people creating AI that we want to live in and live with and still give us that space to be human.
Yeah. And I guess one of the things that makes me think is like, I guess one of the challenges that I think founders are having, and you can confirm this from your conversations as well, is that when you're going to people who themselves don't necessarily understand the ins and outs of the technology, and they're making a decision about whether you get funded or not, like I think that there's probably a pressure to maybe oversell what the tech. I've heard this from a lot of founders, like oversell what the technology can do or not do, or sort of not, or like deprioritize the human part. In fact, somebody was just telling me this, like literally a couple of weeks ago, they were talking to an investment firm and they were pitching their idea to them, and they were kind of like, and they were getting ahead in the conversation. And then they came back to them and they said, well, you need humans to verify data. Sorry, we don't want that. And it's like, well, I mean, okay. But in this case, you want the humans to verify the data because if you don't have those humans, you're going to have a problem with what this technology ends up doing, right? So, but there isn't that sort of perspective, and I just think that I imagine a big tension for a lot of founders, right, on how they adopt and how they use this technology and what they use it for.
There's that, and to your point about the education, there are people who are going to act like they know more than they do, or that their stuff can do more. That's also very human, by the
Yeah.
way. We have
Yeah.
seen that before.
Yeah.
From the investor perspective, somebody who actually knows AI, they're not going to be fooled by BS or by rappers, whatever. Like, if you are a serious AI founder and you want a serious AI investor, you should know who you're talking to. Like, you will find each other, I think. The tools are out there to find each other, at least. And if you are somebody who wants to be investing in AI and you don't fully understand things, then it's incumbent on you to go out and learn what you need to learn to make those smart investments and know which questions to ask.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, that is still a huge important part of this thing, is like, what questions to ask. And somebody who knows their stuff will ask different questions than somebody who doesn't. It's true in anything. Any expert, like, you go to a doctor who knows how to treat your back pain, they're going to ask you different questions than a doctor who doesn't. I want to go to a doctor who knows which question to ask me about my back pain so they can help me, right? Because I don't want back pain anymore. Right?
So Kiran, are you saying then it's responsibility wise, it sounds like there is some responsibility on the founders on which investors they should be working with.
Yeah.
And not just the people who are throwing the most amount of money, I guess.
I am a big believer and proponent of it being an even playing field. A lot of founders can feel like they are at here and the investors up here. And you can make the argument that's true, right? This is the person with money and you don't have it, but you are building something of value. And that is what starts to make the playing field more even. And so you, as somebody with something of value, can say, yes, I want to work with you because I see how you benefit my business, not just with money. And that attitude is not always there for various reasons. Sometimes people have, as founders, certain experiences or beliefs that sort of don't let them see the world in that way. Like I said, try to encourage that, pull that forward. But you don't want an investor who's going to be a liability either consciously or for lack of knowledge or experience, right? So, if you bring on somebody who talks a good game but doesn't actually know what they're doing, like, funny little side story. Last place I expected to happen was at a breakfast table in Jaipur. I was there with my husband. We had just been to a big family wedding. We're hanging out, and it was a German founder with his partner and had done a startup, had closed it up, and somehow we get on this topic. And it turns out he had taken money from somebody who other investors did not like and did not trust. And that is what prevented him from raising his next round. He was a very capital intensive business, and when he could not raise, that game was over. I was like, so who you have money from matters in multiple ways, right? It's just like, who do you want to work with and be working with for a long time? And then, like, is that person actually going to be a liability? If he had known at that point, of taking the money, what that person was going to mean for his business, he probably wouldn't have taken it. It wouldn't have been worth the, like, let's call it 50,000 euros or whatever it was. Like, it wouldn't have been worth it.
So you've spoken about some of this already, I think, but again, given the number of companies that you've worked with and things like that, what are the consistencies of the similarities you've seen around successful ventures versus ones that have been less than successful?
So there's a couple things. Is you have to be really creative in how you keep a company going even when it's hard or things change. I'll tell you, I've been a mentor for lots of accelerator programs, and the Techstars program at USC, which is their first cohort they ran this spring, one of the founders in there, his initial concept was dead on arrival because of changing policy winds, and we'll leave it at that. He had to very quickly figure out a new business and then make sure he got proof. And he did that really, really fast. Like, that's just super impressive, right? Like, that's somebody who's going to figure it out, who wasn't like, oh crap, I'm done, right? Didn't take no for an answer, said, okay, there's got to be another opportunity here. Where is it? And got creative and started looking for it, right? And those people are also the ones who are more likely to find other markets for their business and figure out how to get them. So that's part of it, right? Because the whole game is you got to stay alive, right? If you don't have money, also you're not going to stay alive. So it's a combination of things. And the ones who are open to that feedback, right? It's kind of a sort of known thing, but it really is important. Like, you have to be willing to listen to things. You're going to ultimately make a decision. But if you're never willing to listen and you're really stubborn and you're only going to do it your way, it's going to be really hard to be successful. You're going to have to take feedback from your team. from your board, from other people, and you're going to have to make a decision. Also, you're going to have to be self-aware of where your weaknesses are and be willing to look at them and be honest about them and to do what you can to change things. So that can be in your leadership style, that can be in the way that you are giving feedback to people. Right? If you know that there's something that isn't your strong suit, also, like I've talked to plenty of technical founders who are not salespeople. And they're like, okay, I'm going to have to learn sales. If they're not willing to do that and acknowledge that, they're going to have a really, really hard time. And then they're going to spend too much money hiring salespeople that don't work out because they don't actually know what to look for.
Mm.
I've seen that too.
As a follow-up to that question about the changing or what has changed over the last 20 or so odd years, is that is there more money now than there was back in the day, or are there more startups being funded now than was 20 years ago? Like, does that in any way impact your chances on being successful?
I think there's I don't know the exact numbers. My hunch is yes. I think it got easier because back in the 90s, you actually had to go like physically get servers and stuff like that. Like it used to be a lot harder to build something. And so the costs have come down. The ability to, with all the vibe coding stuff, like you don't have to even have necessarily a technical background to get started and just at least make something and see if people will use it if you can get some traction, right? So I think a lot of barriers have come down. I think a lot more money has moved into that space. I think venture as a space has its challenges as an investment class because the returns haven't always been great. For some firms, yes. For a lot of them, no. The liquidity hasn't been there the last few years. You're starting to see some of the models changing. But I think that if somebody is the kind of person who is just like, this thing has to exist in the world and it's a scalable, venture backable kind of a thing, they can probably find a way to make it happen in the world. And by the way, those are not the only things that matter. And so if you're somebody who wants to solve a problem and you don't want it to be a venture scalable thing and do all that song and dance, you don't have to. And you can still maybe make your community better or make, your children's, lives better because you chose to do something in a certain way. Like I totally respect all that too. There's all this sort of very like hustle culture that I don't think works for everyone. And it's okay to be different.
And then, just I guess another follow-up to that is, have the expectations also changed? Because, I don't know, I'm assuming 20 years ago it was like, oh, you can double your revenue, that's fine. But now it's like, no, I
Well,
want 10x the revenue now. So has that
expectations have changed, right? So there's more expectation that you are going to have revenue early on, that you are going to be able to grow at a certain rate to reach certain milestones in order to reach, like, if you're going to raise this thing. And those metrics are changing. And the first time I heard this concept from a VC, I thought it was really interesting. And I know it's not unique, is that you have different vintages. So a company that was born in a certain year is going to get compared to every other company that was born that year. And how are they doing compared to their cohort? Even if they're in very different industries, like, are they actually growing at a certain rate? Are they able to, raise money or not? Or what kind of valuations? And some vintages are better than others. Like 2008, interestingly, was a great vintage, or 2009. We've seen vintages that have been overpriced. Probably anybody who was born in like 2020, 2021. Seen those stories. So from an investor perspective, they're looking for a really great value, which is more likely to get them the return that they're looking for. And they have got to at least get a couple of those in their fund in order to return the money, right? I think there's not enough founders who understand the way the whole ecosystem works. Like the money's got to flow in down to them, but it also has to go back out. And when the money isn't flowing to them, there's probably a reason they need to like take that step back and be like, what's going on, right? There's other things happening in the ecosystem that are affecting you here all the way, like at the bottom level. And the VC model doesn't always have the best outcomes. And that's something you should know as a founder too. And do you want to be part of it? Do you want to play that game? Do you want to like always be on that next like treadmill of like, I got to raise again in another 12 months? Like, you don't have to. That's up to you. I'm always in favor of the founder owning their destiny. give up as little equity as possible. If you're making money, you have a lot more choices than if you don't.
Do people, I mean, Kirin, I mean, we're coming to a close almost, but I'm curious, like, do founders know that they have options? I mean, I almost feel like because you hear so much about the VC space as kind of being one of the avenues for a founder. Like, how aware
Yeah.
are people that they might have many options to make their dream come true?
I think it's getting better. I think this is one of the things that I love about founders is they're very willing to share their experiences,
Right.
their contacts, to explain how they did something to somebody, right? And so I think it depends probably on which circles you run in, where you are, where you're getting your information from. But I think this idea that you can build in different ways still needs to get out there more. And that, if you want to build the next Google, great. It's going to take a certain path and you can decide, is that the path I want to be on or not? Or am I going to build something different? Am I okay with having this kind of exit? And by the way, with the way these deals sometimes get structured, you're maybe better off taking no investment and selling for 30 million than taking on a lot of VC investment and selling for $1 billion, because you might end up with the same amount of money.
Yeah. And
It's crazy.
yeah, that's wild. So I mean, I'm hoping that you have 3 pieces of advice that you can give founders who are going to be listening to this episode. Like, what would it be? Like, what would you tell them in this crazy world that we're in right now?
Still show up as a human. It matters.
Mhm.
It absolutely does. So use your tools to do things to be more efficient, but still show up as a human for the human conversations that you need to have to build a business. Right. And if you're not good at something, that's okay. It's in your power to do something about it and to learn what you need to learn, whatever that skill is or that area of the business that you don't know. Because as a founder, like for instance, you got to know your numbers. Like if you're not comfortable with things like, customer acquisition cost and average contract value and all those things are actually not that hard to learn. You can go learn them, right?
Mm.
So there's no excuse not to know things once you're aware that you lack that knowledge. And then just to have no regrets. I mean, everything is feedback. I'm not the first person to say that, but at least if you tried, you did it. Like it is the worst thing in the world is to because you don't know how long you've got on this earth. And let me tell you, I have lost already friends at my age. And you shouldn't regret that you didn't try it. So go for it.
Mm. I feel like you're giving us hope, which is really
I want to be hopeful.
No,
I
that's great.
do.
That's
I do.
great.
I believe that humanity is basically good and that the good will win over the darkness. The light wins over dark.
Yeah. Well, and which is why people should cut. No, this is not a pitch for Kirin, but I'm just going to say they should come and work with you because I think that the founder's journey is a hard journey. We know this, right? It's
Absolutely.
lonely. It's difficult. It's oftentimes one where people are like they're committed to their vision or their goal, and they're meeting all kinds of interesting roadblocks along the way, and they need people who are like, no, keep going. You can do this. No matter where it takes you, you have something. It's gonna give you something at the end. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us a sort of like an inside view into sort of the founder's life right now. I know we went to many different places, but I think people will really appreciate what you have to say, and hopefully some founders will kind of take a lot away from this conversation and keep going. Keep
Absolutely.
going.
Absolutely. And anybody who's building an AI, build like a human, please, for the sake of everyone.
Human-centered. Thank you so much for your time. This has been incredible.
Oh, thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. So we're here for the jam session. All right, folks. We went to so many places in this conversation. Shadan, Ashish, what did you think about what Kirin had to say?
Yeah, I just loved the energy, honestly. That in itself was in itself was energizing enough that I was focusing on everything she was saying, and I felt like we covered a lot, and it was a lot of good information in a very short amount of time, if I may, because I feel like we covered so many things and in a lot of detail. So it was not just breadth. We also went a lot into the depth of things here, and it's interesting the perspective she brought as to how things were, like maybe in the dot-com boom, and how things are now, and especially with AI, how things have changed, and suddenly people are asking for AI, not really. And like I kind of felt like VCs need it because everybody else has it, and not really the value of it. So
Mm.
and what I take away is like, if getting the most amount of money or getting money only is not enough, right? Like you need the right partner for the
Mm.
long term growth, and it's not just
Mhm.
short term win, short term win, short term win. Because I kind of feel like that's the era we are living in, where it's like if I want to survive till next year, I just take whatever
Yeah,
short term win I get. And I
sure.
feel like the takeaway is like, it's not, don't always think about the short term win. If it's important, but it's may not
Mhm.
be the best path forward.
Yeah, especially because she talked about longevity, right? Like if you're interested in longevity, then that may not be the way forward for sure. Shadan?
Yeah, no, to your point, Ashish, we covered so much, but not just at the surface level. So it felt like the time really flew by just because one, her energy is incredibly amazing, but then two, the breadth of things that she's actually able to speak to in an in-depth way. And so that point around the importance of choosing your partners and your funders wisely, I think that that was huge. I think that point around the point that she made around maintaining that again, that human centered perspective, and not losing that, and then the points that she made around how it's important to communicate by knowing your audience, knowing what's important to them, and thinking about how to tailor your message. Those are things that
Mhm.
I'll carry with me, as I said during the actual interview, that it applies to, of course, this space, but much more broadly. And so
Mhm.
if our listeners and viewers are taking that away and just applying it to their lives, I think it's just a huge win overall. How about
Yeah.
you, Salima? What do you think?
I mean, I think the one thing that really struck me is the importance, and I think she was emphasizing this in some way, shape, or form throughout the conversation, is in really understanding the ecosystem. Like, if you don't understand how VC works and you want money from VC, you might actually end up having all kinds of blind spots that could basically end your founding experience pretty quickly, because you don't get like, hey, yeah, they want all of us to succeed, but in reality, not all of us are going to succeed. And yet they need a return, right? So, like, how they end up funding, who they end up funding, who ends up getting the Series A, Series B, Series C, whatever it is, right? So, I think that that is a good sort of takeaway for me, for sure, and for all of us around, if you are in this founding space and if you are looking for specifically VC money, and then really understand that ecosystem. And then I think the other piece, which I wish we had more time to dig in with her, is like, what are the other pathways really? Like, you know what I mean? We heard friends and family might be a pathway. We know angel investing is another pathway. Um, we know obviously bootstrapping and like kind of putting in your own money, but that's not possible for, a lot of, I think most of the world probably that's not possible for, right? So like where really do folks go to get creative, and like what are some of those creative strategies that you can really use to get your idea up and off the ground? So I think she was starting to hint at it. She mentioned it. But I think now maybe this is kind of she just threw the ball to us, to all of us in this space, to start thinking about that and really, really figuring out like where that sort of creative opportunities could be for funding to get your idea out there. Because I do think, we are absolutely in the era where more people are building and more people have access to tools to build, and not just in, where we've typically seen it, but really globally. And so there is again maybe this the rising question, sorry, of like, how do people make it happen? And funding is just one angle of it, as she was explaining, right?
Yep. And then I didn't even realize that there are other modes until you asked that question. Because
Right.
with these shows like Shark Tank and all of that,
Right. Yeah.
you always feel like, oh, you have to go to a VC, right? Like
Yeah,
that's like a
yeah,
logical
exactly.
next step. And it
Exactly.
doesn't look like that's the only way. I mean, you can ask family and friends. I mean, you always know that. And maybe the government, but both family friends you can get it fast, but it comes with strings attached, and so does a loan from the government. So,
What is VC? It comes with strings
so is
attached.
VC. Yeah,
Definitely. That
yeah.
point she made about, being careful because,
Oh,
a
that was
30
a good point.
million deal and $1 billion deal may have the same
Yeah.
payout depending on who you brought in and how much ownership you maintain. Powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, and also actually, Shadan, I thought this is where you were going to go, but that other example she brought of being in Jaipur and meeting that founder, and the founder got money from one person,
Right.
but then quickly realized that the rest investors in that space don't like this person, and now he couldn't get further invested in. And I thought that was smart. Like that is such a good example to provide that you really need to do your due diligence on who you're quote unquote getting into bed with,
Right.
on the money end, so that you really know that again, this is about hopefully about longevity for a lot of people, and getting their idea to really flourish in the world. Right, and if that's the case, then you're going to have to be as strategic, not just about building your business or building your tech. You're also going to have to be strategic about the funding aspect of it.
Couldn't agree more. I know we say it often, but we'll have to have her back. I feel like we keep saying that about a bunch of different guests, so
That's
I
so
can't wait to
true.
talk to her again.
Me too. Yeah, I feel like after at our everyone should know our post conversation with her was like we have like 5 other questions we wish we had asked you. So we'll definitely have to bring Kirin back.
Yeah,
All right.
100%.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for
All
watching,
right, all.
and stay tuned for the next episode.
Stay tuned, like, share, and comment because we love hearing from you.
Thanks all.